Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. In this video is to bring you a closer look at the Pemko, part number 114D. This is a threshold. This is an interlocking threshold. And we're going to take a closer look at it right now. So Pemko is a manufacturer of weather stripping for both commercial and residential applications. They certainly have the broadest spectrum, the most variety available, certainly from a single manufacturer of weather stripping. Nobody has more variety than they do, and their catalog is a great resource for you to be able to go through and look at, not only to find what you need, but to also problem solve. I have been able to use their catalog and look at all of their available extrusions just to try to figure out, what kind of problems I can get solved based on what they offer. And as I get this all pulled out here, we're going to talk about it. So this is a 114D. The 114 is a interlocking threshold, quite flat. Interlocking thresholds are very elegant, and it's because they create a tremendous mechanical seal at the bottom of the door, which we're going to go over. The 114 is represented, the 114 part number itself equals these dimensions, which we'll go over in a moment, and its profile, or its cross section. The 114 is 4 1/4 wide and 1/2 inch tall. 4 1/4. And the overall height is 1/2 inch. Bit hard to judge there on the camera, but nonetheless, it's 1/2 inch tall. The D in the part number means dark bronze. You can order this in A for mill aluminum finish. You can order this in D for dark bronze finish. You can order it in G for a matte gold anodized finish. Then you can order this in a B for bronze. You can order this in solid brass or solid architectural bronze. People will generally call it brass. Technically, I think I'd call it architectural bronze. It's an alloy of 4 primary materials, and would be the type of threshold that would be orders of magnitude more costly than an aluminum-based item. But there are projects when having solid brass thresholds is what's called for. Public works, the front of a museum, a home that might be $4 million in Tuscany. You're not going to put aluminum thresholds onto these projects, is the bottom line. So I had mentioned earlier that this is an interlocking threshold, and that basically means 2 pieces fit together to lock and create a seal. On the Pemko 114, what is happening here is that same principle and concept, and how that's accomplished is via a 2-piece design. This is what we would call a J-hook. If you use your imagination, you can see why I would call it a J-hook, or a hook strip. This gets applied to the bottom of the door. This is going to be the door portion of what will create the seal. So the way that this works is simply as follows. Is the hook strip is literally nailed to the bottom of the door. Literally. When the door closes, this hook strip is going to come and it's going to lock in place here. Now the end of this hook strip is deformed because of how they cut it. When you cut that for your finished installation, you're going to clean that up so that it looks appropriate, as you would see here. Okay. Now, an interlocking threshold is very elegant because it gives you that extreme mechanical positive seal. That is a extremely positive seal that you have there. I'm going to open up the other end so we can take a closer look at how well it fits together when the hook strip has not been deformed in the cutting process. Now, what people like interlock thresholds for is because it provides a mechanical means to prevent the intrusion of water, air. It's not going to have a thermal rating necessarily because it's literally metal on metal contact, or at least this is a wipe coat galvanized piece of steel. That's what the hook strip is. My magnet went somewhere. Doesn't matter. We'll find it. Your seal is really going to look like that. This is aluminum. This is wipe coat It's galvanized steel. Wipe coat galvanized is what they would call that. They make steel doors out of it and whatnot. So that's your positive mechanical seal. Every time the door closes, it seals. That's great in Chicago because it's really going to keep the cold air from running in under the door. It's going to permit you to seal that opening. Water's not going to intrude. In Florida, you kind of want to keep your air conditioning inside. Okay, you can stand on the outside of a door frame and just feel the leakage of your AC coming out. Interestingly enough, in the Southwest, in the American Southwest, people look inside their boot before they put their foot into it. And I'll have customers that will call up and say, I need an interlocking threshold. I says, well, where are you located? Well, I'm in Arizona. Yeah, but where? Are you in the mountains or are you a bit lower? Well, I'm pretty low, but the thing is, it doesn't get too cold here necessarily, but I got to keep the scorpions out of my house. So an interlock is a proven way to absolutely secure the bottom of that door based on that interlock type principle. Okay. Now we're going to go over a couple of instances of how you're going to install this. There's really, and this is going to be a really poor drawing. So obviously that's what it's going to look like. Okay. Now, you can get fancy, and a lot of people do on occasion get fancy. I would recommend you consider getting fancy as well, where what you can do is create yourself the ability to tighten up that margin a little bit. Now, what some people will do will be notch the bottom of the door like that. And really all you're accomplishing, and even though it's, it's a good way to accomplish it, is you're reducing the amount of space on the interior side of your threshold. Okay? That's really what you're doing. One time out of 100, someone might install it that way. Although there will be times when customers call up and ask me for as detailed of dimensions as I can give in order to assist them in that process. So, you're either going to kind of install it the garden variety way, which is the typical way, or you might go something like that, okay? I have had people call and say, I took the door off the hinges. Chicago, northwest suburbs, homes built in the 50s and 60s, chock full of interlocking thresholds. Guy calls and says, boy, I took my door off the hinges. I think I got a problem with my threshold because now my door doesn't close. I grew up in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. So I say to the client, well, put your hand under the door. Is there something there? He'll say, my gosh, there is something there. What's going on here? There's something nailed onto that door. So what they do is they'll pull the door off the hinges and then set it down. What does that do to the hook strip? Well, it makes it look like what Pemko did. no longer in good shape. When you get this, you're going to want to trim that with a hacksaw, make a nice preparation to it. You might even get a small dowel rod and put it in there and use it as a form by which to cut against. It needs to look like that. Okay. The good thing about the hook strip is that it's replaceable and it's really inexpensive. These thresholds are known to last literally for decades. And the only time that something like this starts to fail is when the nails, which are included for the hook strip, over years and decades of closing, it will oblong those nail holes through here. It will start to oblong them, and the item will move over time. Decades of use, though, is what you're looking at in that sort of scenario. Now, I gave you the overall height. Now, if I was going to, want to get this installed, you can see that the mouth of that hook is quite ample. So you don't need much more than a 1/16 of an inch to make that absolutely work in terms of where you're going to place it. you know, maybe the dimension from the underside of the door to the top of the sill, it don't need to be more than 1/8 of an inch would be my guess. This material is probably 30 thousandths thick, something in that range, maybe a little thicker. Let's take a look at it. Oh, even thinner. It's about 20 thousandths. Okay, so 20 thousandths thick. The head of the nail is going to stick out a little bit. The reason that this has such a large bird's mouth or deep preparation is because those nail heads are these little wafer heads. They're not going to sit flat. They're going to actually protrude down. So that's why you've got such a large mouth on this. The overall is 0.355, 0.355 between my fingers. Okay, and the center line I'd say, yeah, about 1/8 of an inch. From the back side of here to the center of that bird's mouth prep is what I'll call it. That bird's mouth prep. About 1/8 of an inch. And I think that that would be a pretty good dimension to use in order to get that to seal. That's 20 thousandths. The head of your nail, insignificant, 30 thousandths. That'll be a 16th, you know. Obviously, your door has to be parallel to the threshold. Doesn't mean it has to be perfectly plumb or level, but it sure has to be parallel. So take that into account when you get it installed. You might want to get that threshold put down, and you might want to take as accurate dimensions as you can vertically. And then if you're going to trim your door, trim it accordingly, is what I would do. I would certainly like to do a mortise at the bottom to make that as tight as possible. That's going to look awfully nice, you know, on the pull side, because what you're doing is you're dragging that door down further, so that you're not going to see any of this anyway, unless your head is pressed to the floor. But it would be a nice way to do it. You know, you look at installation, you look at metal weather stripping catalogs from the mid-century, or from before, you know, from the 1920s, or from the late 19th century. Things are mortised. Everything is mortised, is the bottom line. And it would be considered old school to be able to do it that way. If you're having your door manufactured by a company who specializes in manufacturing doors and frames, you might want to ask that they do it that way. That would be a more elegant, more traditional way of doing it, most certainly. This threshold is going to be very effective at keeping out direct intrusion. Now, taller interlocks, this would not feature it because it's not tall enough. But imagine if this dimension between my fingers was 1 inch. But this and this was the same dimension. Well, you would have a trough type preparation where they could then drill a weep hole in the back of that trough and then file a notch in the face to create a water return principle. Okay, so that any water that actually did get in is going to exit right back out. Then at that point you might want to put a water pan, a piece of aluminum, very thin sheet metal that will help keep your sill from corroding with any water that might get in there. I mean, you know, if someone's going to stand there with a hose, yeah, at that point. But rain intrusion, that would be pretty unlikely. You'd have to have some pretty heavy rain. Well, here in southern Florida, you're going to have horizontal rain. Now, this is listed in the site in lots of different lengths, 2 foot to 8 foot. You can have any length you want. Getting past about 7 foot becomes expensive to ship, so reach out to us for a shipping quote. If you have need for a custom length, and it's very likely that you will, this client ordered 32 inch. That might, no, he ordered 34 inch. That might be perfect. He might have a 34 inch nominal size, and the door is actually, you know, 33 3/4. But if you have need for a custom length, let us know by ordering the next longest piece or pieces, and simply indicate in the comment field the net length you'd like for us to cut the material back to. And the reasoning is, well, it'll save you the trouble of having to cut it, and Pemko does get a nice straight cut on that. But it'll save you the trouble of maybe re-drilling any holes for screws. You know, they're located symmetrically pretty much from either end. If you had to take this, let's say this is 3 foot, if you're going to cut it down to 28 inch, yeah, you're going to eliminate a hole that's here. And then it's going to be asymmetrical. So order the next longest piece or pieces and indicate in the comment field the net length that you'd like for us to cut it all back to, and we'll be happy to provide it that way. Now, speaking of those holes, as I'm just sticking the J channel, the hook strip back in there. Screws are included in a complimentary finish. Okay. Finally, there is a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the Pemko products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. I am partial to Pemko, and it's for a number of reasons. They have, again, a very broad product line. They are staffed by people who are genuinely eager to help you in all instances. Their technical support people are thoroughly responsive, and you know, they're pretty reliable overall, as a general rule. And as a result of the exceptional customer service, I absolutely am preferential to Pemko as a line of weather stripping. Any questions on the 114D interlocking threshold or any other Pemko product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.